This Art Life. It's a discussion segment where we talk to contemporary visual artists and is hosted by Tide Rising Art Projects. Today we'll be talking to Errol Keane II. And hey Janice, hey Errol. All right, so Errol is now here. We're just gonna go ahead and bring him in. So just give us a few moments while we set up. How's everybody doing today? Just want to say thank you for joining. This is a new program that we have introduced, and so we're really excited about it. Previously, we spoke to Mr. Chin. Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and bring in Errol. It's cold in England. Hi, Classic Fissy. How you doing? It's pretty hot here in Europe. Hey, Errol. Hi, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you very well. I think everybody else can hear you. So before I brought you in, I was just introducing Tide Rising and mention that we'll be speaking to visual artist Errol Keane. Errol Keane is a Jamaican-born illustrator and fine artist. And my name is Danielle Russell. I am a filmmaker and a member of the Tide Rising Art Projects team. And so, as I was mentioning before, we spoke to Esther Chin in a segment called we spoke with Esther Chin. It wasn't called This Art Life, but we've since changed the format because we realized that we want a little bit more time to talk to the artists, and they have a lot to tell us. So we really wanted to change the format, and so now we're moving forward with This Art Life talk to allow visual artists to share their story. So just as a reminder, if you haven't joined us before, Tide Rising Art Project is an artist-led initiative coming out of Kingston, Jamaica. And we also aim to provide education opportunities for artists and the public, as well as research resources through our videos, website content, seminars, and workshops. So if you aren't following us, you can follow us on Instagram at Tide Rising Art Project. We're also on YouTube, and you can also find us on Facebook. So, Errol, can you tell us where they can find you on social media?
All right. So you guys can find me on Instagram at Keen Eyes. So that's KANE .eyes EYES. Yeah. So I'm really only on Instagram. So if you need to find me, that's where to go.
Okay. So you guys heard that. You know where to find Errol. Okay. So this morning we launched Errol's art documentary, and it's on YouTube. You can go check it out afterwards. But so in that documentary, Errol, we really focused. You spoke about the work that you did during your residency with Blaqmango a while back, and in that art doc, you talks about your collection, the Daughters of Oshun, and so could you just describe to those watching what your collection, the Daughters of Oshun, is about, and your process of image making for that work?
Okay. So the collection Daughters of Oshun, it's really about sexual coercion. I'm trying to kind of word it a little better, so because I don't want to get anybody triggered. But it's really about the struggle that females face when kind of navigating relationships. So it's really kind of my take on that whole situation. Kind of like I'm getting stories from women who I know, kind of just speaking with them and kind of hearing moments in their lives, and um, I kind of created a body of work around that singular moment and the effects that that moment can have on somebody going forward. In terms of image making, it's I kind of get um, I kind of get pull ideas from a lot of different sources. So it could be a conversation I have with somebody um, 2 weeks ago, or like some media consumption I'm doing, like a documentary or random like National Geographic or something like that. So this the imagery with the mushrooms is kind of a combination of uh, a documentary I've watched as well as a conversation I've had with a dear friend of mine. Yeah. So yeah, I think that kind of answers.
Yeah, it does. And one thing in looking at your work and in documentary, and also you mentioned to me earlier, you use Braille a lot in your work, which is very interesting. Can you talk to us about that process of using Braille, why is it that you use Braille, um, and why you place them on your work?
Okay. I first started using Braille when I was in high school. I first got like really interested in Braille when I was in high school, and I always wanted to do more works with Braille on it because I figured art shouldn't be just for the seeing, as in it should be something that everybody can kind of interact with and enjoy. Um, for this work, wait, I think you chipped off for a little bit. I didn't get the second half of the question.
Oh, okay. So I asked you why you decided to incorporate Braille into your work, and what does it mean to you?
Oh, okay.
Do you?
All right. So I just really wanted everybody to be able to interact with and enjoy art. For me, it is. I've never. I may have been. I may be a forward person, more or less, or someone who's easy to talk to somebody. Um, but I've never really been one to share what I'm going through. So I feel what the Braille means to me is a way of talking without talking. So it's a way for me to uh, express these ideas and put it out there, but also not have to communicate it to, not have to like directly communicate it to somebody. So it's there, and if somebody wants to interact with it and wants to know what it says, then they can. But it's not me kind of forcing it or kind of saying, okay, this is what's happening with the situation. Yeah, so that's it for me. It's kind of like a way for expressing myself without people exactly. Yeah.
So one thing that I picked up is that Braille, as you mentioned, is a way for you to express yourself, meaning that and Braille is designed to be touched because it's used for, you have to be able to touch it in order to understand what it's saying.
Mm-hmm.
However, in this particular work, you are talking a lot in Washoe, you're talking a lot about sexual coercion of women, and in your painting, you represent this idea by painting bodies of women on your work, and then you overlay that with the Braille. I think you can actually see a little bit of it in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, in looking at it, forms a kind of a tension in a way. It's kind of two opposing ideas, because this braille is supposed to be touched, but it's laid on top of a woman's body. And not only that, in the art world, it's known that you don't really touch work. So, is this tension that you've created? Is it something that you have done deliberately, and how do you reconcile those two things, and how have audiences reacted to that?
Yeah, you're correct. As in, it's Braille is designed to be touched. As in order to understand it, you need to touch it. But then when you couple that with also the context of the word, it kind of creates a paradox, as you said. It's really when you're navigating the world, you realize that there's a kind of duality in all things. As in, so even with this work, even though it's designed and you are allowed to touch it, it's weird because it's it's a paradox in the sense that it's artwork that you're deliberately supposed to touch, and it's an artwork about a woman that you're not supposed to touch. And so, as a viewer, you're uncomfortable. As in, there's no easy way to say it. As in, like you don't know exactly how to interact with the work as you see it. Because at first glance, you know you're not supposed to touch it because it's an artwork. But then you're supposed to touch it because it's Braille artwork. And then you're not supposed to touch it again because it's a female body. And especially because it's dealing with sexual coercion. So I'm trying to put the viewer in a sense where they don't know what the right answer is. And depending on them and how they interact with it, I think we all have to kind of reconcile this duality and this paradox internally, and that affects how we end up interacting with work. Because I've seen people just readily go up and touch the work like there's nothing behind, there's no issue with it. And then I have people who kind of are standoffish, as in like they see that it's not necessarily something they want to interact with or something they want to kind of get behind. Especially when they see the translation of it, then they realize that it's not something that they want to touch. So I've seen both interactions with it. I think I didn't want to I haven't reconciled it in terms of the work itself. So I kind of left it for the viewer to kind of come up to their own conclusion on how they interact with the work. Because I think there are dualities in all things, and just how you interact with it is going to play a role.
Fair enough. So it sounds like there's also that duality happening within themselves as well.
Yeah. It's when you're looking at coercion, because coercion itself kind of falls on this plane, and there's this thin line separating coercion from seduction. And so when you're interacting with somebody in a relationship, then you may see yourself kind of crossing that line. As in, that line kind of gets muddled in this section, as in you're not sure exactly where a certain interaction may lie in it. So I guess I'm trying to express that confusion or that duality and that kind of paradoxical nature of the situation through the work. So there are no wrong answers in terms of if you touch the work or if you don't touch the work. But I would like you to think about yourself and your own interactions with people and see your actions that you thought were right may not have been right in a different in that context. So it's kind of like expressing that duality that I kind of find myself when I'm interacting with women.
And on that note about a thin line, there's also something which I picked up in your work, which is you talking about sexual coercion, and it's a taboo topic, really. It's something where people kind of want to shy with women.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk about sexual coercion, you try to shy away from representing women as objects, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But in your work, in representing or discussing the idea of sexual coercion, you choose to paint women's bodies, which in modern day culture could be seen as a type of objectification of women's bodies. And if we go even further, it could even be looked at as a form of pornography, because that's how it's represented modern culture. Can you explain to me how you manage to walk that fine line between it being artwork, discussing this idea about sexual coercion, and it being as pornographic images?
Yeah, definitely. All right, so yeah, there's a thin line when it comes to nudity and pornography. And yeah, I do agree. As in, I did portray these women as objects, and it was a way to kind of force the viewer into understanding that they are also kind of objectifying these women in the same sense. As in, like, we're all complicit. We're all in this space, either touching or viewing these bodies, and all seeing these things happening. So we're all complicit in this whole sexual coercion scenario. As in, because we know things are going on, or we've heard things, but we're not talking about it. It's not a discussion that we have. With regards to the line between pornography and nudity, it's a weird space, because the female figure is, in my opinion, one of the most sexualized. I don't want to say objects, but it's the most sexualized in the world. As in, like, everybody, as in, like, and I think that's why when you see say a mother breastfeeding, it's kind of, it it doesn't sit right with a lot of people in, like, the open area, because they see this body as inherently sexual. So, like, seeing it another way, it kind of, it doesn't sit right with you. And I think that is the real issue when it comes to, like, that line, because I think once it's a nude female, you automatically feel that it's sexual. But if it's a nude male, depending on if there's a erect phallus or a flaccid phallus, then you would know where to kind of put that body, which category to put that body in. But with women, I feel like the physical marker to kind of categorize where it should fall isn't there, unless it's like a pregnant female. Then you automatically feel there's a nude pregnant female. It's automatically just nudity. It's not necessarily pornography. So I think it's an issue with biases that we have, like internal biases that we have, and we all have these biases. But how I navigate that is I try to read the room, or like kind of work within my biases. So I know where where not to push the line. But I think it's a serious issue in terms of biases, that we kind of look at these females' bodies as inherently sexual. But yeah.
Yeah, I know there's been debates about breastfeeding in public versus not breastfeeding in public. Like, it's an ongoing thing that I've been seeing online and being discussed everywhere. So yeah, you're right. There is that that there's that issue that we have to kind of reconcile within ourselves, even even something like motherhood,
Mm-hmm.
and see and a mother breastfeeding and being considered sexual in a way.
Yeah.
So we've been talking a lot about your artwork, but we can't ignore the fact that you also are an illustrator. Mm-hmm. And in your documentary, in your art doc, you talked about wanting to go beyond just being an illustrator and developing an art practice. Could you talk to us about, well, one, what is the difference between an artist and an illustrator? Like, what is that difference? And then how do you go about moving between these two spaces, and why is it important for you to be able to do that?
Okay. Right. For me, I don't think there is a huge distinction between an artist and an illustrator, but I feel like in the wider scheme of things, like, that distinction is kind of there. Because, like, when you say, "Oh, I'm an illustrator," and then people kind of automatically categorize you as like, okay, he does
No. Okay. And
hey,
welcome back.
Yeah, my net suddenly dropped, and yeah, so, but I'm back now.
We're glad that you're back. We're actually just discussing where we left off. Actually, we were talking about your difference between being an illustrator and being an artist, and the developing an art practice, and why it's important for you to do this.
Mm-hmm. All right. I feel like when I think I was saying this before I got cut out. I think when people hear illustrator, they think a certain body of work. They're not really thinking of you using, say, wood carving, or even fiber arts or something like that. You are locked into what they think that you're able to create. And if you create something outside of that, it doesn't seem to connect to what they thought they were going to get, or they thought an illustrator would provide or create. And so I feel like, yes, being an illustrator, but also identifying myself as an artist first, kind of allows people to not necessarily box me into like a certain style or medium, because I feel like as artists, you kind of have to develop and go in whichever direction that it takes you. And I think that this is me, because like I think that if people want to say, yeah, I'm an illustrator, that's fine. I don't see an issue with that. But as in, for me personally, I don't think that I want to be boxed in to just drawings on paper. I want to explore other mediums and materials as well. And so I think by creating a distinction, it allows me to not only alienate people who want to see my work, but also grow at the same time. Because I do understand people would see me as an illustrator and want to see illustrations from me. And I would like to do illustrations. But I don't want them to be alienated if I do something that's not necessarily that.
Hi, sweet and dandy desserts. Just saying a shout out to people watching. So how how have you managed to walk between those two worlds, between being an illustrator and having an art practice? Because I imagine that those two worlds are different.
Yeah.
How have you managed to do that, and what advice do you have for people looking, or students who maybe do want to be visual artists but they're coming from other areas in art or other fields, like architecture or something? What advice do you have for them for how to develop an art practice?
I think you should do what you want to do. Because I have a friend of mine who's an architect, and he does really great paintings as well. I said, like, you guys probably know him. But yeah, as in, like, he Richard Natu, he does like he kind of walks a line, like he does everything. As in, like, he's a great guy, ridiculous talent. He just does everything. All right. So I think that anybody who's trying to get into say illustration or art, and they're going from different backgrounds, you just have to remember that everything is kind of connected. So whatever you as an artist or as a creative, you take influences from all aspects of your life. So there's not one thing. That's the whole idea of intersectionality. So everything is kind of connected to create you and to create your work. So don't feel like because you're doing this that you can't do that. But with regards to illustration and illustrating for people, you have to also kind of be able to take yourself outside of your work as well. Because as an illustrator versus an art practitioner, you find yourself doing works for people who may not see your vision. And you can explain your vision and kind of get them on your side, but that's not necessarily always going to work in your favor. So you have to be able to take yourself outside of your work as well. Whereas when you're an art practitioner, as in, like, you do whatever you want to do. You create freely. As in, there may be some guidelines in terms of if it's a mural project or something like that, that you have other guidelines kind of influencing how you create, but it's ultimately your freedom as an artist. Yeah.
And there's a comment here. It says, Miss Campbell here, formerly from EMCVP Art School. Remember me? Think about this. The mind that sees limitation is the limitation.
Yeah. I remember you, Miss Campbell. We had very good conversations. Yeah, it is. The if you box yourself into like a certain mindset, like, okay, I'm an illustrator and I'm only doing this kind of work, then you limit yourself to all the possibilities of creating different illustrations. Because this is a conversation I had with a lecturer of mine back when I was doing my final year at Edna. Because I was taking Braille, but also doing some relief illustrations as well. And I would have loved to push it more, but as in, like, finances and everything kind of came to play. But he was saying, yeah, you could just even take a photograph of this illustration that you've done, and depending on where you take a photograph, because it's a relief, the natural shadows could fall wherever you want it to fall. So depending on which angle or which light, you create multiple illustrations from that one piece, right? So by looking at different ways to create and to create illustrations, you can create more diverse illustrations. So even like materials like steel wool, try using steel wool and create texture out of that. As in, there are different ways to kind of incorporate different materials into your work.
So it really sounds like there's some fluidity going on between illustration and art, and some of each practice bleeding into the other, and just influencing it. And it's really, from what I'm getting, it sounds like illustration is more about it's more of a commercial aspect to it.
Yeah, I think art is. Well, for me, it's more of a commercial aspect to it. Because it's like you can illustrate for yourself, but for me, I think the idea of illustration is storytelling, and if you're telling somebody else's story, that's their story. So it's whatever they kind of want to be portrayed. So you have to kind of take yourself outside of that.
Okay. So we have a question here from Anika. How do you balance both modes of working?
Balance is a tricky word. I have not found a balance as yet. I oftentimes I spend more time doing one thing than the other, and it's kind of because art takes time, and so you find yourself doing one thing to kind of build yourself in that direction, and then you realize that you're kind of lacking in the other direction, and then so you kind of switch gears to kind of build yourself up in that direction. I do want to marry the two, and just kind of walk a singular path, but I haven't found that balance as yet. So I'm still at that crossroads, that fork in the road when it comes to the kind of balancing the art practice. And it does kind of take a toll on you. So balance, I can't answer that. I'm not zen at all.
Thank you for your honesty. It's something that I think we need to hear, because we're all at different stages in our practice, in our careers. We have a question, a comment here from JJS News. Janice, hey. Totally agree with the point about how the intersectionality of all the different things, elements, circumstances, etc., that collaborate to create who you are, influencing your chosen art practice. And then we have a question here from Ms. Campbell. Why the need to separate the art forms? All are related, just expressing differently, don't you think? So
yeah, I think so as well, but I think because in the art community we can see that all art is kind of under the same banner, as in you can be an artist working in a variety of mediums creating art. But I think the distinction is for people outside of the art community who may not necessarily understand that art forms kind of bleed into each other and kind of overlap. It's kind of like a mess, like a giant yarn ball kind of everything. But this distinction is kind of really for people outside of the art community who don't really know exactly about the inner workings of it.
I see. Okay, so we have one more comment here. Also, not limiting yourself / stretching your boundaries, or rather the space you're currently occupying. And so, Errol, on that note, I just want to find out, what are you currently working on, and what can we expect to see from you in the future with this whole yarn ball of art and illustration that you have going on?
Okay. I am working on a project. I should be working on a project in the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure if I can speak much to that, but I also have a comic book that I'm working on. So it's called High Tides, and it's it's an idea kind of birthed from my love for African diasporic cultures, as well as the different religions, so African syncretic religions and like different elements kind of fused together to kind of create a story. I don't want to speak too much about it, but essentially it's a story about a young girl who is trying to save her island home from cataclysmic destruction. So it's just her trying to stop basically a giant hurricane from wiping out Jamaica. There's some African mythology in it. There's some environmental impacts, climate change issues in the work as well. So it's I feel it's a story that is right for now, especially considering the climate change argument, as well as African culture, as well as where you're trying to figure out where you're coming from, your ancestry. There's a lot of different ideas that I kind of put into the work. So I'm looking to try and get the first 2 volumes out this year, God's willing. So that's for my illustration side. As for my fine arts, I'm looking at an idea I've been kind of grappling with for a while. It's about trying to figure out your potential. It's like I think a lot of us as artists, we're not necessarily sure of our ability and or sure of ourselves as artists. And so I kind of wanted to create a body of work that kind of resonates with that idea, because I'm not completely sure of myself as an artist. I can come on this interview and I'll be like, yeah, let's talk about work and it's all good. But when I'm creating the work, as in there is a lot of self-doubt when you create the work. And so I want to create a body of work that kind of speaks to that and speaks to the kind of the dark side of creating. That would have been this year, but 2020 is a wild roller coaster. So I'm looking to finish that series for next year, and hopefully put on an exhibition next year.
Okay, and is this the last that we'll see of the work that you started in at the Blaqmango residency?
No, it won't. I hope to put out a conclusion to the series, because when you look into the title of the work, Daughters of Oshun, Oshun is the Yoruba and Orisha of fertility women, is of the river as well. But when you look into her, you see that she has a specific number, and that number is actually 5. So when you look at the body of work, I've only done 4 so far. So I have in the works. I'm looking to create a 5th installment for the series.
Okay. All right. So before we wrap up, there are a couple of questions and comments. We have a comment from Blaqmango. It says, categories are also about value as well, how we label, categorize creative output and impact on the values placed on said output. So I think that's the discussion we had about illustration versus being an artist.
Definitely.
Valuable. You have a question here from Marva Keane. We would like to know what master's program he plans to pursue leading up to him becoming a professor. He said he would like to be from a child.
I wonder who this is from. I don't recognize that name at all. But I I do not know where I want to go. I have been grappling between art writing and art practice, and to see which direction I go for my master's. It's still a toss up. I'm still not quite sure which direction I want to go in, because I feel talking about art and creating a discussion about art in Jamaica is really important. I feel like that discussion needs to expand further, which is why I really love what you guys are doing. I feel like the discussion about art needs to kind of expand and kind of cover Jamaica, or Jamaican art rather. But I also want to spend as much time and energy building my own practice and kind of reaching the best, becoming the best artist that I can be. And so like I feel like back to the fork in the road, it's kind of like if I go down this direction, I'm going to have to spend more time to build myself that way, and I might be neglecting somewhere else. So I'm not quite sure. It's possible to do both in many programs. That is true.
Advice there, so you can probably take that advice into consideration. Okay. Yeah. And some more advice. You might want to check out Gasp or Vibe Cultural Arts Incubator current traveling exhibition Intersectionality launched in Washington D.C. last year.
I'm going to check that out. Yeah,
So, all right. So we still have some people joining. Hi, Articles and Joe Whimsy. Hello to everybody who has joined, and we're just going to so on that note. Errol is going to go off and do his master's in art, right? In art practice. We will, and when you do, we'll bring him back on and we'll talk to him about how it's going and everything. Yeah. But we just really want to thank you so much, Errol, for talking to us and being so open and raw and vulnerable with us. And we really appreciate it, because I think, as you said, if you come on here and talk about the art and, this is how it is and that kind of thing, but there is a process involved, and I think it's important for people to hear about that process, to realize that it doesn't just happen overnight. Yeah. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who joined and who asked questions and who gave comments and who listened in, and even when we had technical issues, you stayed on. So thank you so much. Yes. Where's Errol going? So thank you again. It was This Art Live. You will be able to watch this video on our Instagram, Tiderising Art Project Instagram page, which is at Tiderising Art Project. You'll be able to see everything, articles. We spoke all about Braille, the Braille in the work that Errol does. Errol spoke about as well, so you'll be able to watch that. And so we just ask you to follow us on Instagram for more talks like this with more contemporary artists, to follow us on YouTube, where you'll see more art docs, and to like us our Facebook page at Tiderising Art Project. And Errol, could you just share with us where we'll be able to find more about you and your work?
All right, so you guys can follow me on Instagram, which is Keane.eyes. So my last name .eyes. It's a nice little fun. This is my main page. This is where I kind of post whenever I have something to post. I do intend to kind of expand and look at other platforms as well, but I'll always inform you guys here first. I also want to thank you guys for having me on for this interview. I think it was a really cool and a really good discussion about my work, because I feel as artists, you need to kind of speak about your work as much as possible. And so like even like the questions that you gave me, I was like Yeah, this is some serious questions. All right, yeah, this is nice. Um, and I also want to thank the Blaqmango Arts Residency as well, because I feel like I know in myself, like if it wasn't for me kind of going into that residency, this body of work probably wouldn't have come out from it, because the whole dynamic that I had before I kind of discussed. So I'm really thankful for that opportunity to kind of put my work and my name out there as well.
Okay. So thank you so much. One last comment before we go. Sweet Standard Desserts, Ms. Campbell says, also the online journal Cultural and Pedagogical Inquiry, Onika has a fabulous article on the intersection of art and education. I was the editor of the edition titled Caribbean Pillow. So much information for you, Errol, for everyone else who joined. And thank you so much again. Thank you to everyone who joined. And we will be back soon with another This Art Live. Until then, you can connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and send us messages, comments, etc. And we will love to hear from you. So thanks again, everybody, and take care. Enjoy the rest of your day, Errol.
Bye.
We'll see you. Bye.
Thanks for coming, guys.